I stood in front of Charlotte's imposing Atlanta home, my 2 worn suitcases at my feet, and a stack of writing drafts tucked under my arm. The Georgian sun beat down mercilessly, as if warning me about what lay ahead. At 74, I thought, I knew everything about betrayal. I was wrong. "Mom, you're finally here!" Charlotte's voice rang with an enthusiasm that would later haunt me. She rushed down the front steps, her designer dress floating around her like an expensive cloud. Her embrace felt different, tighter, more purposeful than usual. I should have recognized it for what it was. A spider's first thread in an elaborate web. Just 3 weeks earlier, I had been contentedly planning my retirement in my cozy Savannah apartment. After decades of writing romance novels, meeting publishing deadlines, and maintaining weekly columns, I had earned my peace. My modest home had a small balcony where herbs thrived in terracotta pots, and I had just signed up for ballroom dancing classes at the community center. Life was simple, organized, and mine. Then came Charlotte's calls. At first weekly, then daily, her voice dripping with concern about my living alone. At my age, each conversation was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, though I didn't recognize it then. "Mom, I can't bear thinking of you all alone in that apartment. What if something happens? Don't you want to spend time with your only daughter? I want to take care of you." Care. Such a beautiful word. Such a cruel weapon. I had spent my entire career crafting stories about love and betrayal, yet I failed to see the plot unfolding in my own life. I sold my apartment, my sanctuary, canceled my utilities and subscriptions, said goodbye to my few but dear friends, and boarded a train to Atlanta, all because I believed in the power of filial love, in the simple joy of mother-daughter bonding. The first red flag appeared within hours of my arrival. Charlotte was unusually busy with phone calls, speaking in hushed tones in corners. Her husband Michael kept giving me strange, almost apologetic glances. Then came dinner, and with it, an unexpected guest. Michael's boss, Walter Bridges. I still remember how the fork trembled in my hand as Charlotte casually mentioned that Mr. Bridges' son needed a math tutor. "Mom's so good with numbers," she said, as if selling a product. "She'd be perfect for Daniel, wouldn't she, honey?" Michael nodded weakly, avoiding my eyes. The bread in my mouth turned to ash as I realized this wasn't a casual dinner at all. It was a business meeting. My daughter had arranged a job for me before I'd even unpacked my bags. "Elderly people need to stay active," Charlotte whispered later that night, her words sharp despite their soft delivery. I won't have anyone saying I'm harboring a parasite. Parasite? The word hit me like a physical blow. In that moment, standing in the guest room that felt more like a prison cell, I realized I hadn't moved in with my daughter. I'd walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I found myself sitting across from Daniel Bridges in his family's luxurious study, attempting to explain fractions to a clearly disinterested teenager. My fingers, which had spent decades crafting stories that touched millions of hearts, now trembled as they drew division lines on pristine paper. Not from age, no, from something far more insidious, the dawning understanding of my daughter's scheme. "Mrs. Brooks, thank you so much for your time," Mrs. Bridges said afterward, her manicured hand already reaching for her checkbook. "Charlotte mentioned your rate is $100 per hour." My heart stopped. "I'm sorry, what?" "Oh yes, we've already arranged everything with your daughter. She's been so helpful in setting this up." I watched, numb, as she wrote the check. Later, when Charlotte handed me $30 from the session, her expression was perfectly neutral, as if this splitting of earnings was the most natural thing in the world. "For your pocket money, Mom." she said, patting my shoulder. "See? Isn't it nice to feel useful?" Useful. The word echoed in my mind as I lay awake that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling of my new room. I thought about my life before this moment, about the path that had led me here. For 30 years, I'd built a career from nothing, raising Charlotte alone after her father left us for his 20-something secretary. I'd written my first novel on a second-hand typewriter, pecking away at the keys during pre-dawn hours before Charlotte woke up for school. My books never made bestseller lists, but they sold steadily, enough to put food on the table to send Charlotte to a good college to keep us comfortable. I remembered the pride in my daughter's eyes when my first book was published. Or had. I imagined that pride. Had she always seen me as someone to be used, to be managed, to be profited from? The signs had been there, I realized with growing horror. The way she'd discouraged me from dating after her father left, claiming it would hurt her social standing. How she'd convinced me to co-sign her first car loan, then mysteriously lost her job just when the payments were due. The temporary credit card I'd opened for her college emergencies that somehow never got closed. But this was different. This wasn't just taking advantage of maternal love. This was calculated exploitation. Through the thin walls, I could hear Charlotte and Michael arguing in hushed tones. "The apartment in Savannah," Charlotte was saying. "Once we sell it, we can clear our debts. She doesn't need it anymore anyway. Don't you think this is going too far?" Michael's voice was uncertain, weak. "She's your mother." "She's old, Michael. She needs structure, routine. We're doing her a favor. Besides, what else is she going to do with her money? Leave it to some charity?" I pulled my pillow closer, but it couldn't muffle the truth. My own daughter saw me as nothing more than a resource to be drained, an asset to be liquidated. The woman who had once sat on my lap, begging for one more bedtime story, now plotted to strip me of everything I'd built. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of writing about complex family relationships, I was living in one of my own plots. Except this was no fiction where love ultimately triumphs. This was real, and the villain was my own flesh and blood. Over the next few weeks, Charlotte's scheme revealed itself like chapters in a poorly written mystery novel. Each morning brought new opportunities for me to be useful. Besides tutoring, Daniel Bridges. I found myself cooking elaborate meals for Charlotte's dinner parties, events she charged her friends to attend, marketing them as intimate gatherings with a renowned novelist. I was both the entertainment and the unpaid chef. But it was the discovery I made one Wednesday afternoon that finally shattered any remaining illusions. I had just finished another tutoring session with Daniel when I overheard Mrs. Bridges talking on her phone in the garden. "The sessions are amazing," she was saying. "Eleanor Brooks, yes, the romance novelist. She's just wonderful with Daniel. A bit expensive at $100 an hour. But Charlotte assured me it's her standard rate." I froze, my hand clutching my measly $30 from that day's session. Quick mental arithmetic revealed the brutal truth. In the past month, alone, Charlotte had pocketed over $2,000 from my work, all while lecturing me about not being a parasite. That evening, I discovered something even more disturbing. While searching for my reading glasses in Charlotte's home office, a room I was supposedly welcome to use, I found a stack of papers hidden behind some books. Real estate listings for my Savannah apartment building, property valuations, development plans for the entire block, and there, paperclip to everything, a half-written email to a developer, with Charlotte posing as my legal representative. My hand shook as I read the words. "As discussed, once the building is cleared for demolition, The compensation package for each unit will exceed 500 $. My mother, being of advanced age, has authorized me to handle all negotiations. I hadn't authorized anything. I didn't even know my building was being considered for demolition. Mom? Charlotte's voice made me jump. She stood in the doorway, her face shifting from surprise to anger to calculated concern in the span of seconds. What are you doing in here? Looking for my glasses, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Found something much more interesting, though. Oh, that? She waved dismissively. I was going to tell you about it. It's really exciting, actually. Think about it. We could use that money to build you a beautiful granny flat in our backyard. You'd never have to worry about anything again. We are. The presumption in her words made my stomach turn. And what about my writing room? My herb garden? My dance classes? I asked. Charlotte's laugh was light, practiced. Mom, you're 74. Don't you think it's time to act your age? Besides, she paused, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. There's something else I need to tell you. You're going to be a grandmother. The announcement hung in the air like poison gas. In any other circumstance, it would have been joyous news. But here now, it felt like another carefully placed card in her house of manipulation. Isn't it perfect timing? She continued, her voice honey-sweet. You can help with the baby. We'll be one big happy family. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The little girl who once made me dandelion crowns had grown into a woman who saw my life's work as nothing but a convenient ATM. My retirement dreams were being demolished as surely as my apartment building would be, all to fund Charlotte's vision of family. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat by my window, watching Atlanta's lights flicker like warning signals, and began to plan. Charlotte wasn't the only one who could be strategic. She'd forgotten one crucial detail. Before I was her mother, I was a writer. And if there's one thing writers know, it's how to craft a perfect plot twist. The morning, after discovering Charlotte's real estate scheme, I woke up different. Decades of writing about strong women had taught me one thing. Rock bottom is where metamorphosis begins. I studied my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Silver hair, laugh lines earned from years of joy, eyes that had seen enough of life to know better. Time to write your own ending, Eleanor. I whispered to myself. My first act of rebellion was subtle. I called my old neighbor in Savannah, asking her to check my mail. That's when she told me about the official-looking letters from the development company. They're offering a fortune for these old units, she said excitedly. Some people are already selling. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Charlotte hadn't invented the development deal. She'd just appointed herself my unauthorized negotiator. Knowledge was power, and for the first time since arriving in Atlanta, I felt a spark of it returning to me. That afternoon, while Charlotte was at her yoga class, where she'd also volunteered me to teach creative writing for mindfulness, at $20 per student, her cut being 70%, I made two important calls. The first was to my bank in Savannah, placing a freeze on my accounts. The second was to a lawyer friend who'd always appreciated my novels. Eleanor Brooks, Sandra Chen answered warmly. It's been too long. Sandra, I need your help, I said, keeping my voice low despite being alone. And I need this conversation to stay between us. For the next hour, I outlined everything. The tutoring scheme, the dinner party charges, the real estate manipulation, and Charlotte's convenient pregnancy announcement. Sandra listened without interruption, only the occasional sharp intake, of breath betraying her shock. "First things first," she said finally. "We need to protect your assets. I'm sending you some documents to sign. Don't tell Charlotte about any of this. And Eleanor, start keeping a diary. Document everything." That night at dinner, I played my role perfectly. I asked about the baby, pretended to be excited about Charlotte's plans for my apartment money, even smiled when she mentioned converting her home office into a nursery. "Since you can write anywhere, Mom." But inside, I was different. Every condescending pat on my shoulder, every dismissive, "Mom, trust me, I know what's best." Every casual mention of my retirement fund, I recorded it all in a small notebook hidden inside my collection of Jane Austen novels. Books Charlotte would never touch. I documented dates, times, conversations. The writer in me appreciated the irony. My daughter had turned me into a character in her story, but she'd forgotten that characters can rebel against their assigned roles. I also began making strategic moves of my own. I accidentally mentioned to Mrs. Bridges that I used to charge only $40 for private tutoring. I let slip to Charlotte's friends that the intimate dining experiences they were paying premium prices for were actually just me cooking family recipes I'd be happy to share. Small acts of resistance, but each one a thread pulled loose from Charlotte's carefully woven web. The real breakthrough came when I discovered something Charlotte didn't know. My old publisher had been trying to reach me about re-releasing my backlist as ebooks. The advance they were offering wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small apartment in Savannah, an escape route if I needed it. "Mom, you seem different lately," Charlotte remarked one evening, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Is everything okay?" I smiled, the same smile I'd given her when she was 7, and insisted she hadn't eaten the cookies clearly crumbling from her pockets. "Just feeling blessed," I said, "to have such a caring daughter." She beamed, missing the steel, beneath my words. That was her fatal flaw. She was so convinced of my helplessness, so certain of her control, that she couldn't see the strength gathering beneath my quiet exterior. Like any good writer, I knew that the most powerful plot twists are the ones the reader never sees coming. By my second month in Atlanta, I had mastered the art of invisible resistance. While Charlotte paraded me around like her personal golden goose, I was quietly building my escape route, brick by brick. My Jane Austen collection now concealed not just my diary, but also a new bank account book, legal correspondence from Sandra, and printouts of my publishing contract negotiations. The turning point came during one of Charlotte's elaborate dinner parties. She had outdone herself this time, charging her friends $200 each for an evening with a literary legend. I was supposed to share intimate insights into the creative process while serving them my signature coq au vin. As I stood in the kitchen preparing the meal, I overheard Charlotte in the living room, her voice carrying that practiced tone of concern. "It's been such a blessing having Mom here. She was getting so forgetful in Savannah, you know. The other day, she couldn't even remember where she put her reading glasses." My hand stilled over the cutting board. The glasses she had hidden herself, I later discovered them tucked behind the potted plant in her office. "That must be so hard," one of her friends sympathized. "And now, with the baby coming..." "Yes, it's perfect timing, really. Once we sell our old apartment, we'll have enough for a proper nursery. Mom won't need all that space anyway, and it'll be better for everyone if she's here where we can monitor things." The carrots under my knife became casualties of my controlled fury. Monitor things, as if I were a faulty appliance rather than a woman who had successfully managed her own life for decades. A woman who had raised her alone, who had built a career from nothing, who had never missed a deadline or a bill payment. But I maintained my composure. When I served dinner, my smile never wavered. I shared carefully curated stories about my writing process, answered questions about character development, and even read a passage from my latest work in progress. All the while, my mind was racing ahead, plotting like I'd taught my characters to do. That night, after the guests had left, Charlotte counted her earnings at the kitchen table. "See, Mom? Isn't this better than sitting alone in that musty apartment? We make such a good team." I watched her stack the bills, remembering how she used to sort her Halloween candy the same way. Greedily, possessively. "We certainly do," I replied, sipping my chamomile tea. "By the way, dear, I've been thinking about what you said about the apartment." Her head snapped up, eyes gleaming. "Really?" "Yes. Perhaps you're right. Maybe it is time to let it go." I paused, letting her victory settle. "But we should do it properly. I'd like to meet with the developers myself." "Oh, Mom, you don't need to worry about that. I can handle everything." "I'm sure you can, sweetie." I patted her hand, channeling every manipulative mother I'd ever written about. "But you know how I am. I need to understand all the details. It helps with my anxiety." Charlotte's face softened with practiced concern. "Of course, Mom. Whatever makes you comfortable." That night, I sent a coded email to Sandra. "The garden is ready for planting." She would understand. It was time to set our countermoves in motion. I'd spent my career writing about women finding their strength, their voice, their power. Now it was time to live it. As I lay in bed, I could hear Charlotte on the phone in her room, excitedly telling someone about her success in convincing me to sell. She had no idea that while she was playing chess, I had switched to poker. And I was holding cards she didn't. Even though we're in the deck, the meeting with the developers was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. Charlotte had arranged everything, of course, making sure it coincided with what she thought was my regular tutoring session with Daniel. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Bridges had canceled all future sessions after our little chat about pricing discrepancies. I dressed carefully that morning, my best navy suit, pearl earrings, reading glasses hanging from their chain. The perfect picture of a sophisticated elderly author, exactly what Charlotte wanted to present to the world. She practically glowed with satisfaction as we entered the sleek downtown office building. "Now remember, Mom," she whispered in the elevator. "Let me do most of the talking. These negotiations can be complicated." I smiled serenely. "Of course, dear." The conference room held 4 men in expensive suits, all wearing identical expressions of practiced sympathy. Charlotte had clearly prepped them about handling her fragile mother. I recognized the type. I'd written about enough corporate sharks to know their feeding patterns. "Mrs. Brooks," the eldest one began, "your daughter has told us so much about you. We understand this must be a difficult decision." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out my reading glasses with deliberate slowness, "I'm quite curious about the email correspondence you've had with my daughter regarding my property, particularly since I never authorized her to negotiate on my behalf." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Charlotte's head whipped around so fast I heard her neck crack. "Mom, what are you doing?" "My job as a property owner," I replied calmly, opening my briefcase. "Now, gentlemen, I have here a cease and desist letter from my attorney regarding any unauthorized negotiations about my property. I also have documentation of several interesting conversations about development plans that were held without my knowledge or consent." The corporate sharks exchanged glances. Charlotte's face had gone from rosy to ashen. "Mom, You're confused. I told you I was handling everything." "Yes, you certainly were handling everything." I turned to face her fully. "Including pocketing 70% of my tutoring fees, charging your friends to eat my cooking, and planning to use my property's sale to clear your own debts. Would you like me to continue?" "Mrs. Brooks," one of the developers interjected, "perhaps we should reschedule when things are clearer." "Things are perfectly clear," I said, my voice steady. "I am in full possession of my faculties, my property, and as of this morning, evidence of attempted financial exploitation. Would anyone like to contest that?" The silence was deafening. Charlotte's hands were trembling, her carefully constructed facade crumbling like an overcooked souffle. "Mom, please," she whispered. "You're embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" I gave her the look I used to give when she'd been caught in a lie as a child. Try defrauding me, exploiting me, attempting to steal my home and my independence while pretending it was for my own good. I was trying to help you. No, Charlotte, you were trying to help yourself. To my money, my property, my labor, everything but actually helping me. I stood up, gathering my papers with deliberate care. "Gentlemen, I apologize for wasting your time. Any future communications about my property can go through my attorney. Her card is on the table." As I walked to the door, Charlotte's voice cracked behind me. "Where are you going?" I turned, finally letting her see the steel beneath my maternal softness. "Home, Charlotte. To my apartment. To my life. The one you tried to steal." But the baby needs its grandmother." "Ah, yes, the baby." I paused at the door. "Tell me, how did your appointment at the fertility clinic go? The one my friend Nancy saw you cancel last week?" The color drained completely from her face. In that moment, she knew, really knew, that she'd underestimated me. While she'd been playing her little games, I'd been building my case, gathering my evidence, laying my trap. "Mom," she started, but I cut her off. "I taught you to read, Charlotte, to walk, to dream, to stand up for yourself. But somewhere along the way, you forgot the most important lesson. Never underestimate a woman who spent her life writing about justice." I left her there, surrounded by the ruins of her schemes. In the elevator, I finally let my hands shake, let the tears gather in my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness or defeat. They were tears of release, of victory, of a woman who had finally written her own ending. The taxi ride back to Charlotte's house was both the longest and shortest 20 minutes of my life. My hands clutched my briefcase like a life raft as Atlanta's streets blurred past the window. I had won the battle, but wars leave casualties, even necessary ones. "You sure you're okay, ma'am?" the driver asked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. "You look like you've been through something." I managed a smile. "Just rewriting my story." He nodded sagely, as if he understood perfectly. Perhaps he did. At Charlotte's house, I moved with the efficiency of someone defusing a bomb. My belongings hadn't fully unpacked themselves in these 2 months anyway. My heart had known better. As I folded my clothes and packed my manuscripts, memories flooded unbidden. Charlotte's first steps across this very carpet pattern in our old home. Her graduation day smile, the proud gleam in her eye when my first book was published. Where had that daughter gone? Or had I simply failed to see who she really was all along? The sound of the front door slamming jolted me from my reverie. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. "How dare you!" Charlotte's voice cracked like a whip. "How dare you humiliate me like that?" I continued folding a sweater, my movements deliberately calm. I simply told the truth, Charlotte. The humiliation was your own doing. My own doing? She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I was trying to take care of you. Everything I did was for your own good. Was it? I set down the sweater and turned to face her. Was it for my good when you pocketed 70% of my tutoring money? When you charged your friends to eat my cooking without telling me? When you tried to steal my home? Steal? I was trying to protect you. You're getting older, Mom. You need someone to manage your affairs. Manage my affairs? I picked up my notebook, the one hidden in my Jane Austen collection, and opened it. Like how you managed to cancel your fertility clinic appointment while still pretending to be pregnant. Like how you managed to hide my reading glasses to make me seem forgetful. Should I go on? I have dates, times, conversations, all documented. The color drained from her face. You were spying on me. No, Charlotte, I was protecting myself. Something I should have done years ago. I closed the notebook. You know what the saddest part is? I would have helped you if you'd just asked. If you'd been honest about your debts, your struggles. I'm your mother. I would have helped. Help. Her laugh was hollow. You call it help to leave me with nothing while you sit on a gold mine? That apartment building is worth a fortune now. And it's mine. My voice was quiet, but firm. Every penny of it was earned by my work, my words, my sacrifice. Just like every penny you tried to steal from me these past months was earned by my effort while you played puppet master. She stepped closer, her face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. You're just a selfish old woman who can't accept that she needs help. Who's going to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself? I've been taking care of myself, and you, for longer than you've been alive. I zipped up my suitcase. And I'll continue to do so without your particular brand of care. If you walk out that door, she hissed, don't expect to ever see me again. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my daughter, but a stranger wearing her face. A woman so consumed by greed that she'd tried to steal her own mother's life under the guise of protection. You know what the difference is between us, Charlotte. I picked up my suitcase. I write fiction for a living, but you've chosen to live one. Goodbye, dear. I hope someday you understand the difference between caring for someone and controlling them. As I walked down the stairs, her words followed me like poisoned arrows. You'll regret this. You'll end up alone and helpless, and then you'll see I was right. But I didn't look back. I'd spent my career writing about strong women making difficult choices. Now it was time to be one. Sometimes the bravest ending isn't riding off into the sunset. It's walking away from a toxic love that masquerades as care. The Savannah air hit me like an embrace when I stepped off the train. My beloved city welcomed me back without judgment, its Spanish moss still swaying in the same gentle rhythm. But everything else had changed. Most importantly, me. I'd booked a room at the River Street Inn while I sorted out my next steps. Sandra, my lawyer, had insisted on meeting me there immediately. She arrived with a manila envelope and a bottle of wine. First things first, she said, pouring us each a glass. The developers sent this. She slid a document across the table. They're mortified about the whole situation. Apparently, they had no idea Charlotte wasn't authorized to negotiate. They're offering to deal with you directly, and the numbers they're proposing are significant. I took a long sip of wine before responding. What would you do, Sandra? She leaned back, studying me with keen eyes. Honestly, I'd wait. That building's value isn't going down anytime soon. But more importantly, You need time to process everything that's happened. She was right. The past 48 hours felt like chapters from someone else's novel. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Charlotte's friends expressing shock at her deception. Mrs. Bridges apologizing profusely for her unwitting role in the exploitation. Even Walter Bridges himself, who'd fired Michael after discovering how they'd used me to curry favor. There's something else, Sandra added, pulling out another document. Remember those e-book rights your publisher was interested in? Well, your story of standing up to financial exploitation has gotten around. They're offering 3 times the original advance, plus they want a new book, a memoir about reclaiming your power. I nearly choked on my wine. A memoir? Eleanor, you're not just a romance novelist anymore. You're becoming a symbol for elderly empowerment. Check your email. There are already 2 podcast interviews requests. People want to hear your story. I walked to the window, watching the riverboats drift past. My reflection in the glass showed something I hadn't noticed before. A straightness in my spine, a lift in my chin. The woman who'd boarded a train to Atlanta with naive hope 2 months ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and finally free. You know what the strangest part is? I turned back to Sandra. I keep waiting to feel guilty, to feel like a bad mother for walking away. But all I feel is relief, Sandra suggested. Peace, I corrected her. For the first time in years, I'm not wondering what Charlotte needs from me, what she'll ask for next, how she'll use my love against me. I'm just me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Charlotte, this one less angry than desperate. Mom, please. Michael lost his job. We need you. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I showed it to Sandra, who shook her head. She's still trying to manipulate you. Yes, I agreed. But now I can see the strings. I blocked Charlotte's number without responding. That evening I sat on my hotel room's balcony, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keys. The story poured out of me. Not a romance this time, but something raw and real. A story about love turned toxic, about the courage to walk away, about rediscovering yourself when the world expects you to disappear quietly into old age. As I wrote, I could hear laughter from the street below. Young women out for the evening, their whole lives ahead of them. I thought about all the stories we tell our daughters about standing up for themselves, about not letting anyone diminish their worth. Somewhere along the way, we forgot to keep telling those stories to ourselves. My cursor blinked on the first page of my memoir. I typed the title, The Price of Peace, How I Stopped Being a Character in Someone Else's Story. Then, smiling, I added the dedication. To all the women who thought their strength had an expiration date. It doesn't. The first podcast interview changed everything. I'd done media appearances before. Local morning shows, book signings, the occasional radio spot. But this was different. The host, a woman in her 30s named Maya Chen, didn't want to talk about romance novels or writing tips. She wanted to talk about power. Mrs. Brooks, she began. Her voice warmed through my headphones. Your story has struck a chord with so many people. What made you finally decide to stand up to your daughter's financial exploitation? I took a deep breath, remembering the moment in Charlotte's house when everything became clear. I realized I was editing my own life to fit someone else's narrative. As a writer, I know how dangerous that can be. The interview went viral overnight. Suddenly, my inbox was flooded with messages from women. Not just elderly mothers, but daughters, sisters, wives, all sharing their stories of financial manipulation, disguised as love. Some had lost homes, savings, entire lives to family, members who claimed to be protecting them. One email particularly stood out. It was from a woman named Gloria, 82 years old. Dear Eleanor, I've been living with my son for 3 years. He controls my pension, my medication, even when I can use the phone. After hearing your interview, I called my niece. I'm moving, out next week. Thank you for showing me that courage doesn't have an age limit. My publisher called the next day. Eleanor, this is bigger than a memoir. This is a movement. They were right. Within weeks, I found myself speaking at women's groups, senior centers, financial literacy workshops. My message was simple. Love shouldn't cost you your freedom. But it wasn't all public triumph. Private moments still caught me off guard. Finding an old photo of Charlotte's first day of school. Hearing a mother and daughter laughing in a cafe. Receiving wedding invitations addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Brooks and family. The pain was there, but it had transformed into something else. Wisdom. One morning, I received an unexpected visitor at my temporary apartment. It was Mrs. Bridges, Daniel's mother, clutching a newspaper. I had to come, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. After everything, I just needed to apologize in person and to thank you. Thank me? She placed the newspaper on my coffee table. There was my story. Front page of the lifestyle section. 74-year-old author exposes elder financial abuse. Inspires national conversation. Because of you, Mrs. Bridges continued. I started looking into my mother's finances. My brother, he'd been doing the same thing Charlotte did, using Mom's money, making decisions without her consent. We stopped him, Eleanor. You helped me save my mother. I invited her in for tea, and as we talked, I realized something profound. By saving myself, I had somehow created a ripple effect of salvation for others. That evening, I returned to my memoir manuscript with renewed purpose. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was becoming a guidebook for others, trapped in gilded cages of familial obligation. The words flowed easily now. They tell us that age brings wisdom, but they don't tell us that wisdom sometimes means unlearning what we've always believed about love. That sometimes the strongest thing we can do is walk away from those who claim to protect us while picking our pockets. That our golden years don't have to be years of silent submission. My phone buzzed. Another message from a blocked number. Charlotte, probably, with another attempt at manipulation. But her words couldn't reach me anymore. I was too busy, writing my own story. One where being a good mother didn't mean being a willing victim. Where love didn't require surrender. Where age meant power instead of weakness. Outside my window, Savannah's evening light painted the sky in shades of possibility. On my desk lay invitations to speak at conferences, requests for interviews, and letters from women finding their own courage through my words. I picked up my favorite pen, the one I'd used to sign my first book contract, and added a new line to my memoir. Freedom has no age limit, neither does strength, and neither, I've learned, does the right to say no to those who would love us to. Death. 3 months after leaving Atlanta, I found myself standing before a packed auditorium at a women's leadership conference in Charleston. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of writing about fictional heroines, I'd somehow become one, myself. The most dangerous cage, I told the audience, is the one built from love and guilt. It's comfortable, familiar. Sometimes we don't even realize we're inside until we try to spread our wings. The response was immediate. A forest of nodding heads, tears quietly wiped away, hands squeezing other hands in recognition. After the speech, a line of women waited to talk to me, each carrying her own story of manipulation disguised as care. But life has a way of testing our convictions just when we think we're strongest. I was signing copies of my newly released memoir, when Sandra rushed through the conference center doors, her face tense. "Eleanor, we need to talk. Now." In a quiet corner, she showed me her tablet. There was Charlotte being interviewed on a local Atlanta morning show. My daughter looked perfectly put together, tears glistening artfully in her eyes. "My mother's book is a work of fiction," she was saying, her voice trembling. "She's always had a wonderful imagination. It's what made her novels so popular. But lately, she's been confused, paranoid, making accusations. We tried to help her, to protect her, but she twisted everything into this horrible story." My hands clenched around Sandra's tablet. Charlotte had found a new angle. If she couldn't control me through guilt, she'd try to destroy my credibility. "There's more," Sandra said grimly. "She's filed a lawsuit claiming defamation and elder self-neglect. She's trying to get guardianship over you." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Guardianship, the ultimate weapon in the arsenal of those who would protect us to death. With it, Charlotte could control everything. My money, my home, my very freedom. "She's claiming your memoir shows signs of cognitive decline," Sandra continued. "She has experts ready to testify that your accusations against her demonstrate paranoid tendencies." I sat down heavily, remembering all the times Charlotte had hidden my glasses, commented on my forgetfulness, created situations designed to make me appear confused. It hadn't just been about money. She'd been laying groundwork. "What do we do?" I asked. Sandra's smile was fierce. "We fight. Remember all that documentation you kept? Every manipulative text, every hidden fee, every cancelled fertility appointment? We have proof, real proof." But it wasn't just about proof anymore. This was about something bigger, about every woman who'd read my memoir and found the courage to reclaim her life. If Charlotte succeeded in painting me as confused and paranoid, she wouldn't just silence me, she'd silence all of them. I straightened my spine, feeling that familiar steel return. "Call a press conference," I told Sandra. "Right here, right now." An hour later, I faced a room full of reporters, my voice steady and clear. "My daughter has accused me of being confused, of imagining her financial exploitation. She hopes you'll see a fragile old woman who needs protection. Instead, let me show you exactly how clear-minded I am." I proceeded to detail every manipulation, every scheme, every calculated move, dates, times, amounts. I showed bank statements, text messages, recorded conversations. But more importantly, I showed strength. "I am 74 years old," I concluded. "I've written 23 novels, raised a child alone, and built a career from nothing. Now, my daughter wants you to believe that my age makes me unreliable, that my independence makes me unwell. She's not just attacking me. She's attacking every older person who dares to stand up for themselves. Every woman who refuses to be controlled. Every person who chooses freedom over false protection." The reporters' cameras flashed like lightning. In that moment, I wasn't just defending myself. I was fighting for every person who'd ever been told they were too old to know their own mind, too fragile to control their own lives. As I left the podium, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mom, please stop this. You're only hurting yourself." I didn't bother blocking this new number. Instead, I saved it as a reminder. Sometimes the strongest walls we build are the ones that keep toxic love from flooding back in. The courthouse steps in Savannah were crowded the morning of the guardianship hearing. Women of all ages had gathered, holding signs with quotes from my memoir. Love shouldn't need control. And freedom has no expiration date. Some had traveled from other states, forming what the media dubbed Eleanor's Army. Inside, the courtroom was a study in contrasts. Charlotte sat with her attorneys, perfectly coiffed, projecting vulnerable concern. Michael wasn't there. He'd apparently fled to Florida after his debts caught up with him. Mrs. Gallant, his mother, sat behind Charlotte, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "Your Honor," Charlotte's lawyer began, "we're here today because a concerned daughter is watching her elderly mother spiral into paranoid delusions. Mrs. Brooks's recent behavior, the accusations, the sudden flight from family care, this sensationalized memoir, all point to a devastating pattern of cognitive decline. I watched him pace before the judge, spinning my independence into symptoms, my strength into senility." Charlotte dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Then Sandra stood up, her heels clicking purposefully on the courtroom floor. "Your Honor, before we continue, I'd like to present Exhibit A." She nodded to her assistant, who wheeled in a large screen. What played next silenced the entire courtroom. Security footage from the developer's office, showing Charlotte actively impersonating me in meetings months before I moved to Atlanta. Bank records detailing how she'd siphoned money from my tutoring sessions. Audio recordings of her bragging to friends about her plans for my property. "And now," Sandra continued, "I'd like to call our expert witness, Dr. Miranda Chen, head of geriatric psychiatry at Emory University, who evaluated Mrs. Brooks just last week." Dr. Chen's testimony was clear and devastating. "I found Mrs. Brooks to be not only completely competent, but displaying remarkable psychological resilience and emotional intelligence. Her decision to leave an exploitative situation demonstrates exactly the kind of sound judgment we hope to see in our older patients." Charlotte's facade cracked. "She's my mother!" she burst out, jumping to her feet. "Everything I did was to protect her." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mrs. Gallant Brooks, sit down." But Charlotte was beyond control now. "You're all being fooled. She's manipulating everyone with her stories, just like she always has. She's nothing but a second-rate romance novelist who—" "That's enough." The judge's voice cut through Charlotte's tirade. "Young lady, I've heard enough. This court finds no evidence whatsoever of cognitive decline in Eleanor Brooks. What I do find is substantial evidence of attempted financial exploitation, fraud, and now perjury." He turned to me, his expression softening. "Mrs. Brooks, not only am I dismissing this guardianship petition, but I'm issuing a restraining order against your daughter. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges regarding the financial exploitation of an elder." The gallery erupted in applause. Through my tears, I saw Charlotte crumple into her chair, her carefully constructed world of lies finally falling apart. Outside, reporters clustered around Sandra and me. But it was the other women I noticed, the ones who'd been sitting quietly in the gallery, taking notes, finding their own courage. One elderly woman approached me, her hands trembling. "I've been living with my son and his wife for 5 years," she whispered. "They take my Social Security check every month, tell me I'm too confused to handle my own money. After today, I'm calling my sister in Virginia. I'm going home." That evening, alone in my apartment, I received an unexpected call. It was from a senior center in Miami. "Mrs. Brooks," the director said, "we watched your case online. Would you consider coming to speak to our residents? We have so many who need to hear your message." I looked out my window at the Savannah sunset, thinking about all the quiet battles being fought behind closed doors, all the women being told they're too old, too fragile, too confused to control their own lives. "Yes," I said. "I'll come. But I have one condition. I want to teach them how to document everything, how to fight back, how to win." As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "I hope you're happy now. You've ruined everything." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began writing the next chapter of my memoir, typing words I wished I'd known decades ago. The greatest victory isn't in winning the battle. It's in showing others that the battle can be won. That age doesn't mean surrender. That love without respect isn't love at all. That sometimes the happiest endings come not from reconciliation, but from the courage to walk away. 6 months after the courthouse victory, I found myself in an unexpected place. A converted Victorian mansion in Savannah's historic district, surrounded by women who'd become more than just supporters. They'd become family. The mansion, once a bed and breakfast, had been purchased with the proceeds from my memoir and the sale of my apartment building. But it wasn't just my home anymore. We turned it into the Eleanor Brooks Center for Women's Financial Independence, a safe haven where older women could come to rebuild their lives after financial exploitation. Margaret, a retired accountant who'd escaped her own controlling children, ran financial literacy workshops in what used to be the parlor. Rose, a former legal secretary, helped women document their cases and connect with resources. And Sarah, who'd fled from her manipulative son-in-law with nothing but a suitcase, now managed our emergency housing program. "Eleanor," Sarah called out one morning. "We have a new arrival." The woman who stepped into my office reminded me so much of myself a year ago. Elegant but uncertain, strength hidden beneath layers of doubt. Her name was Patricia, and her daughter had been draining her retirement account while telling everyone that her mother was too confused to manage money. "Midge, I read your memoir 3 times, Patricia said, twisting her wedding ring. "But I don't know if I have your courage." I took her hands in mine. "The courage was always yours. My story just helped you find it." That evening, as I worked on the center's newsletter, I received an unexpected email from Mrs. Bridges. Daniel, my former tutoring student, had been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship in mathematics. "You were the first person who made him believe he could do it," she wrote. "Who saw past the bored teenager to the potential beneath. We both wanted you to know." Attached was a photo of Daniel in an MIT sweatshirt, grinning proudly. I printed it out and added it to what we'd started calling our Victory Wall. A collection of photos, letters, and news clippings celebrating every woman who'd found her way to freedom through our doors. The wall had become quite a tapestry. Gloria, dancing at her new senior living community's social, free from her son's control. Maria celebrating the opening of her own small business, funded by the retirement account she'd finally wrested back from her manipulative nephew. Helen beaming in front of her new apartment, keys in hand, after 10 years of being told she couldn't live independently. Later that night, during our weekly community dinner, a tradition we'd started for residents and staff, Rose made an announcement that brought tears to my eyes. "The state legislature has just passed the Eleanor Brooks Act," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "It strengthens penalties for elder financial exploitation and makes it easier for older adults to regain control of their assets." The dining room erupted in applause. As I looked around at these faces, some still bearing the shadows of past trauma, others glowing with newfound freedom, I realized we'd created something revolutionary. A family built not on obligation or blood, but on mutual respect and shared survival. My phone buzzed. Another block number. Charlotte had taken to creating new ones every few weeks. But her messages no longer held any power over me. Her attempts at manipulation had become like scenes from an old novel I'd finally finished reading. Instead, I focused on the conversation around me. Margaret was helping a new resident set up a secure bank account. Sarah was planning our next self-defense class. Two elderly sisters who'd recently escaped their abusive children were teaching each other to use social media to stay connected with their grandchildren. This was what family could be, should be. Not a chain of obligation, but a network of support. Not a prison of guilt, but a garden of growth. As the evening wound down, I retreated to my private balcony with a cup of tea. Below, in the garden we'd planted together, roses bloomed alongside herbs and vegetables, just like us. Beautiful things growing from the soil of survival. I opened my laptop to work on my new book, Beyond Blood, Building Families of Choice. The words flowed easily. Sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into, but the one we build from the ashes of broken trust. Sometimes the strongest bonds aren't forged in DNA, but in shared understanding, in mutual respect, in the fierce protection of each other's right to live freely. A soft knock at my door. One of our newest residents, holding a manuscript of her own. "Would you read it?" she asked shyly. "It's my story. You helped me find the courage to write it." I smiled, making room at my small table. "Sit down," I said. "Let's discover your voice together." On my 75th birthday, the center was in full celebration mode. Women had come from across the country, some to share their stories, others to seek help, all part of what the media had dubbed the Eleanor movement. The Victorian mansion buzzed with life, its rooms filled with laughter, tears, and the unmistakable sound of chains breaking. I was in the middle of cutting a cake decorated with "Freedom has no age limit," when Sandra burst through the door, her face grave. "Eleanor, you need to see this." In my office, she pulled up a news article on her tablet. The headline hit me like a physical blow. "Michael Gallant found in critical condition in Miami hotel." Below was a picture of my former son-in-law, looking nothing like the polished man who'd once helped orchestrate my exploitation. "He left a note," Sandra said softly. "He's named names, Eleanor. Everyone involved in various financial schemes, including..." She hesitated. "Including Charlotte," I finished. "Yes, she's being investigated for multiple counts of fraud. Not just against you. There were others, elderly neighbors, church members, even her mother-in-law, Mrs. Gallant." I sat heavily in my chair, memories washing over me. Charlotte as a little girl, proudly showing me her first attempt at writing a story. Charlotte at her college graduation, full of dreams and promise. Where had that person gone? Or had she ever really existed? A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Rose, looking concerned. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Mrs. Gallant." My first instinct was to refuse, but something in Rose's expression made me pause. "Send her in." The woman who entered my office was not the proud, judgmental figure I remembered. Mrs. Gallant looked smaller somehow, her designer outfit replaced. By simple slacks and a sweater, her carefully maintained facade cracked beyond repair. "Eleanor," she began, then stopped, struggling for words. I owe you an apology. More than an apology. I should have seen it. Should have stopped it." "Seen what?" "Everything. Charlotte. She didn't just target you. She's been doing this for years, even to me." Her voice broke. "All those times I helped her attack you, I was really just helping her perfect her technique. And now, Michael." I poured her a cup of tea, remembering how she'd once stood behind Charlotte in court, glaring at me with righteous indignation. "Tell me," I said simply. The story poured out of her. How Charlotte had gradually taken control of her accounts, claiming to be protecting her assets. How she'd isolated Mrs. Gallant from her other children, using the same tactics she'd tried to use on me. How Michael had finally discovered the extent of Charlotte's schemes and fled, unable to face his own complicity. "The worst part," Mrs. Gallant whispered, "is that I helped her hurt you because I truly believed we were doing the right thing, that we were protecting you from yourself." She looked around my office, taking in the awards, the published books, the victory wall. "I've never been so wrong in my life." A commotion outside drew our attention. Through my window, I could see a news van pulling up to the center. Charlotte's schemes were about to become very public. "What will you do?" Mrs. Gallant asked. "When they come to interview you about all this?" I thought carefully before answering. "I'll tell the truth. Not for revenge, but because every woman needs to hear it. Every daughter who thinks love means control. Every mother who thinks submission means devotion. They all need to understand where that path leads." "She'll go to prison," Mrs. Gallant said softly. "Yes," I replied. "And maybe there, she'll finally face who she's become." As if on cue, my phone lit up with a message from a new number. "Mom, please, I need your help. I can explain everything." Mrs. Gallant saw the message and gave a bitter laugh. "She sent me the exact same text an hour ago." I placed the phone face down on my desk and stood up. "Would you like to join us downstairs? We're celebrating something much more important than my birthday. We're celebrating freedom." As we walked downstairs together, two women who'd found unlikely solidarity in shared survival, I could hear the voices of my new family rising up to meet us. Strong voices, free voices, voices that would never again be silenced by false love or manipulative care. In the entrance hall, a reporter was setting up her camera. "Mrs. Brooks," she called out, "do you have a comment about your daughter's arrest?" I paused on the stairs, feeling the weight of every woman's story contained within these walls. "Yes," I said. "Love shouldn't need victims to survive. And it's never too late to learn that lesson." 1 year after Charlotte's arrest, I stood in my favorite spot on the center's wraparound porch, watching the sunrise paint Savannah's sky in shades of possibility. The morning air was thick with the scent of jasmine from our recovery garden, where women staying at the center grew flowers alongside their renewed sense of self. The newspaper on my lap carried the headline I'd been both dreading and expecting. "Charlotte Brooks Gallant, sentenced in elder fraud case. 5 years, with possibility of parole after 3. The article mentioned my name, of course, but I was no longer just the victim or the mother. I was described as advocate, founder, voice for the voiceless. "Tea's ready," called a familiar voice. Margaret emerged from the house carrying 2 steaming mugs, followed by Mrs. Gallant. Helen, as she now insisted I call her. In the months since her own awakening, she'd become one of our most devoted volunteers, using her social connections to raise funds and awareness for elder financial abuse prevention. "The morning group will be here soon," Margaret reminded me. "Full house today." I nodded, sipping my tea. Our weekly support sessions had grown from 5 women to 50, then spawned chapters in 3 other cities. Women helping women heal, grow, and learn to trust their own strength again. "Have you decided?" Helen asked softly. She knew what today was. Charlotte had written again from prison, requesting a visit, her first in a year. "Yes," I replied, pulling an unopened letter from my pocket. "I'm sending her this instead." The letter had taken weeks to write, each word carefully chosen. Dear Charlotte, I've read all your letters. The apologies, the explanations, the promises to change. A year ago, I might have been tempted to believe them. But love isn't supposed to need so many explanations. I'm not writing to condemn you. I'm writing to free us both. You are my daughter, and a part of me will always love the child you were. But I don't owe you my presence, my trust, or my peace. Those are mine now, earned through hard lessons and harder choices. I've enclosed something for you, a journal and a copy of my latest book, Beyond Blood. Not the memoir, but the guidebook we've created at the center, helping women recognize and escape financial abuse. Read it. Really read it. Try to understand why your actions weren't love, no matter how you justified them. When you're ready, truly ready, to do the work of changing, the center will help you. Not because you're my daughter, but because that's what we do here. We help women find their way back to themselves. Until then, I release you. I release myself from the obligation to fix you, save you, or maintain a relationship that hurts us both. I release us both from the story we've been trapped in. Write your own next chapter, Charlotte. Make it a better one, with hope for your healing, Eleanor. As I sealed the envelope, a car pulled up to the center. A new arrival. We got them almost daily now. Sarah went to greet her, and I watched from the porch as another woman took her first steps toward freedom. Ready for the morning session? Margaret asked, helping me gather my notes. I looked around at the home we'd built. Not just the physical space, but the community of strength it represented. In the garden, 2 residents were teaching each other watercolor painting. Through the window, I could see Rose helping another woman document her case. From the kitchen came the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of laughter. Real laughter, the kind that comes with feeling safe. You know what I'm going to tell them today? I said, standing up. That sometimes the happiest ending isn't riding off into the sunset with love restored. Sometimes it's standing in the sunrise of your own truth, surrounded by the family you chose, doing the work that heals not just you, but others. And sometimes, Helen added with a gentle smile, it's learning that the mother-daughter story you thought you had to live isn't the only story you can tell. I picked up my notebook, no longer hiding it in Jane Austen novels, but carrying it proudly. Inside were the stories of hundreds of women who'd found their way to our door. Each one a testament to the strength that comes not from being unbreakable, but from learning to break free. Yes, I agreed, heading inside to meet our newest arrivals. Sometimes the best stories are the ones we dare to write for ourselves. Behind me, the rising sun caught the center's new sign, making the gold letters glow. The Eleanor Brooks Center for Women's Financial Independence, where every chapter is a new beginning. In my pocket, Charlotte's letter felt lighter now, not because I'd stopped loving her, but because I'd finally learned to love myself more. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Give it a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.